Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Human Element. Today I'm speaking with Patrick Gilman, lawyer, partner, co-head of national security practice at Eversheds Sutherland. Patrick, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, bud. Thanks for having me.
Let's start off. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey so far?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I'm a partner and the co-head of our national security practice at Eversheds Sutherland. I am from Chicago. I left Chicago a little over 20 some years ago to join the military, which is where I, for the most part, started my legal career. I spent about 15 years on active duty as an Army lawyer, and most of which in special operations units. And then I retired. I took a disability retirement, in fact, and joined private practice. And so here I am 5-6 years later in private practice, getting ready to watch my wife, who I met in our basic training course, retire from the Army as she starts the next chapter in her life.
Oh, that's awesome. So, okay, that must make for some interesting life events then. That's an interesting confluence. Can you tell me about any life events that shaped how you lead teams?
Oh God, there's so many. Look, I think coming from the background that I come from, so let me first start by saying that lawyers are notoriously bad leaders. I think of all of the jokes about lawyers, there's a lot that ring true. And I am a lawyer. I'm a practicing lawyer. I feel like I can say this. Of all of the jokes about lawyers, I think the reality is that leadership is not something that is trained into lawyers. And so I can't say whether I'm a good leader, a bad leader, a great leader. What I can say is I've been around incredible leaders throughout my life, and I've been around really, really bad leaders. And being in the military, you've got both incredible leadership and sometimes not so great leadership. And so I try to take from the leaders that I've had throughout my career that I respected and looked up to. I try to emulate some of those characteristics and really try to avoid the ones from leaders that I had that were not so good.
Any examples of characteristics you look to avoid?
So I used to be a big yeller. I try to avoid doing that now. As I've gotten older, I've matured more, and I've realized that I think some people are just not so responsive to that. So I look to avoid being impulsively reactive, I guess is a way that I would describe it, right? Out giving myself a chance to but I look to avoid reacting without giving myself time to process what I'm reacting to. So those are a couple of things that I really try to avoid, particularly when dealing with subordinates and even with peers. Superiors, I'm not so worried about, as my superiors these days are my clients, and you don't generally yell at your clients. Or if you do, they're not going to be your clients for very long.
I was going to say, you don't want them as a client anymore if you've reached that stage. No. Do you think there's something that makes lawyers particularly bad leaders, or is it just that you haven't been given that experience and that training?
So I think it's a good question. It's a fair question. I think it's both. Lawyers tend to be hyper competitive individuals. A lot of them are type A, some not, but a lot are type A. And look, you get the same type of personalities, I suppose, in the military. You have type A, hyper competitive people, but the difference between the two is, lawyers, when they're operating, they're not brought up to operate a team. They're brought up to be a part, as a junior lawyer, to be part of a team, right? And as you kind of grow through the ranks, you go from being a part of a team to leading a team without really understanding kind of the transition and the roles and responsibilities of doing that. And it's not something that you learn in law school, right? There isn't a leadership class that they teach in law school. And so you just don't have the benefit of that. And then on top of everything else, when everything that you're doing, particularly in the private sector, is motivated by money, right? I run a business. My practice is a business. My law firm is a business. That's just how it is. Everything kind of, not everything, but oftentimes other considerations are secondary to that, to the business and generating revenue. So I think I think all of those kind of contribute to the way in which lawyers, and it's not isolated to just lawyers. I think I see this amongst a lot of professionals in the type of environment that I operate in, whether it's consultants or lawyers, physicians, same kind of thing.
High-end type A people tend to lone wolf it, and
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was anything related to, like, risk aversion or something like that.
Well, that's a whole different conversation, right? That we can certainly have. I'm not so sure that everybody would agree with what I have to say. But look, I mean, yes, times change and people become afraid of subjecting themselves to certain levels of exposure. I unfortunately haven't learned that lesson yet, but maybe one day. Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
So can you tell me about, a mistake that led you to significant personal growth?
It's like a life full of mistakes that have led me to significant personal growth. I've lived my life outside the average of how your average big law attorney has lived their life. I've been pretty impulsive in my decisions throughout my life. Some would even say reckless when I was younger, in my late teens and early 20s, and probably into my late 20s and even early 30s. And whether those decisions were some of the decisions I made were mistakes or not, they've all kind of contributed to who I am now and the life I live now. And I kind of like the life I'm living now and who I've become, and the father I am, the friend that I am, the counselor that I am, and the husband that I am, right? And so there are a ton of mistakes along the way, including, like I said, I was a big yeller, right? When I was younger, and very kind of temperamental, I suppose is a way to put it. And, there were incidents involving that where I learned, you have to learn from that. When people don't respond the way that you want them to respond, you need to kind of understand, like, oh, hey, this is not working. Let's try something else. So those types of things, throughout my life have kind of brought me to where I am now, for sure.
Is there a mentor, a senior officer, or something that, someone who really helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think my first mentor, real mentor, is a man named Tom Durkin. And Tom recently passed within the last month and a half.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. He was, I mean, aside from the fact that he was just an incredible man, he was an incredible family man, an incredible mentor, an incredible lawyer, and I loved him dearly. Still do, obviously, but he taught me kind of what it means to be a lawyer and the power that comes with it, and how important it is to use that power, authority, whatever it is, productively and to benefit society. And it was actually working with him while I was in law school, and then after graduating law school, it was working with him and seeing kind of how mission focused he was into doing what's right and what would had the greatest benefit on society as he saw it, right? I knew I was going to join the military because I believe in mandatory civil service, and that at that point in my life, that was the right time to do it because I was more mature and likely wasn't going to end up in jail at Leavenworth. But seeing his passion for the law and seeing his passion for, helping underserved people get justice is really kind of put me over the edge and made me realize, like, this is the right decision regardless of what everybody around me is saying. This is the right decision, and I'll go do this for a little while, and then I'll go back and I'll work for Tom in Chicago and, continue down that road. Well, that didn't happen. I mean, I joined the military and ended up staying and making a career out of it. But Tom was certainly my first mentor, and I stayed in touch with him right up until, he passed. And there have definitely been mentors in the military. It's kind of part of the military ethos, teach, coach, mentor. But if I had to pick one, it would be Tom Durkin, for sure.
Can you think of any valuable lessons you've learned? I usually put this in terms of security incident or operational failure, but maybe I'll turn it around and ask it around, a case or a project. Obviously, not asking for any details, but any specific values you've gotten out of that? Things going sideways?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been around a lot of crises, right, in my life, in my career, both in the military and in the private sector. And what I know with absolute certainty is lack of preparation, lack of training, lack of appreciation for risk almost always ends in disaster. And as a kid, I spent my entire life studying martial arts and competing in martial arts. As a kid, I always trained the way I was going to fight. In the military, you train the way you fight. And in the private sector, it should be no different. But it is. It's very different. And so oftentimes what I found, particularly in my career, in my practice area, is businesses, individuals are ill prepared for the specific risks that they face. So that when something bad does happen, they don't have a reaction plan, or if they do, it's so inadequate, it goes right out the window and they're left flailing. So preparation, preparation, preparation. And when you think you're prepared enough, you prepare more.
Wise words. What is the most rewarding aspect of your job?
I really enjoy working with my clients to solve their problems. It makes me feel, it makes me happy. It makes me good. I love the work that I do. I love the people that I do the work for. I have really great clients, whether they're individuals or corporations. The people I deal with day to day, both on the government side, on behalf of my clients and my clients themselves, all are really, really great people and trying to do good things. And so helping them accomplish whatever their mission is extremely rewarding. It's extremely rewarding when they have a problem and I'm able to help them solve it. Because that's all I do really is help them solve problems. At the end of the day, the solution is theirs. And so when I'm able to do that and give them a solution or help them come to a solution and resolve their issues, it's incredibly rewarding. That in and of itself. In the military, serving my country, that was, I don't think there's anything I'll do other than be a father, continue to be a good dad. There's nothing I'll do in my life going forward that was as important as the time that I spent in the military serving my country. And nothing that I'll ever do that I feel the same level of, I don't pride or reward, wearing that patch on my shoulder and the U.S. Army tape over my heart meant something, and it still means something to me. So, I've been involved in multiple theaters of combat throughout my life, and just standing next to the people who hold your life in their hands and you holding yours or theirs and yours is just, there's nothing that I'll do that matches up to that. But I know that, and I'm okay with it.
So clearly, in your military time, trust was super important. How do you build trust with your clients, your partners, your colleagues?
Look, you have to be honest, even if it's to your detriment, right? Always tell the truth. Always be completely transparent. At least, that's what I think. Yeah, it's me. This is how I operate, right? Be completely transparent and honest with the people that you're working with. Let them know when they're failing. Let them know when they're succeeding. Praise in public, criticize in private. And with clients, don't be afraid to give them bad news if the news is bad. Have a solution for him, usually, if you can, but be honest and transparent. And, I found that doing that, well, number one, I don't know any other way, because if I was less than that, I would forget and it would be a disaster. But doing that seems to work well for me and for the team, my team, and and our success and going forward.
Speaking of success, how do you and your team define success?
Look, I'm part of a large organization, so how my large organization defines success is probably a little bit different than how I define success. But in any business, I think success is measured, using a few different data points. One is certainly, P&L, profits and losses. And if you're making profits, how much and how utilized are you and how utilized are your people? I define success by being able to give the people who work for me and work with me enough work that they're not worried about whether or not they're going to make their billable hours requirements, giving them enough work that is diverse and varied so they become not just a subject matter expert on one specific nuanced area of the law, but on multiple areas of the law, giving them enough work and being able to train them so that they're able to do kind of broad spectrum issue identification and problem solving. That's how I define success. And if we're successful in doing that, then the rest of the stuff, all of the other matrices will equal success too. Money will come with that, and you know all of the other stuff comes. But for me, success is having a team that works with me, that's good at what they do, that are happy with what they're doing, and that are utilized and feel a sense of purpose and joy.
Sounds good. Is there a daily routine you found to be especially helpful?
On terrible at daily routines. I like, yes, I mean, absolutely. There is a daily routine that I've found to be successful, at least on paper. And then as soon as I wake up every day, intending to, okay, I'm going to work out at 5:30 in the morning, and then I'm going to check my emails, and then I'm going to take my son to school or to the bus, and then I'm going to go to the office and do 8, 9 hours in the office and then come home. And as soon as I make any kind of plan like that, within the first 12 seconds of me being awake, something happens and that's blown right out the window. So unfortunately, in my business, having a daily routine is difficult. And I'm not particularly good at setting boundaries. A lot of lawyers are, particularly, transactional lawyers, very good at setting boundaries and saying, like, after this time, unless it's an emergency, I will do X or I will do Y at this time every day. I'm not a transactional lawyer, so it makes it, I'm always in crisis mode. All of my clients have some kind of crisis happening, and so daily routines in my life unfortunately don't equal success because of me. Maybe they would, but daily routines are terrible. Plus, and frankly, I'm on the road so much, I travel so much that, developing a daily routine is difficult. I have a pretty good road routine because I'm usually in time zones that are about 8 to 10 hours ahead Eastern time, which gives me a pretty good block of time in the morning that I can, morning wherever I am, that I can do the things I would otherwise do if I was, in the US.
All right. So, along that same theme, if you find yourself off track, overwhelmed, unfocused, what do you do to get back on track?
So exercise is a huge part of what I do to keep myself sane, I suppose, and clear my head. When I find myself, I try not to I try not to get stressed out about things. I try not to let things overwhelm me. Because what I can say with absolute certainty is if you allow yourself to be overwhelmed and you allow yourself to be stressed, tomorrow's going to come and there's going to be no difference, if you hadn't been overwhelmed and hadn't been stressed. So there's really no value in becoming stressed. Overwhelmed, everybody from time to time feels overwhelmed, but when that happens, I just kind of try to take a break and take a breath and say, like, I've got a lot to do, but I'm not going to be able to, I'm going to feel this way tomorrow unless I just start ticking things off the list. So get to work, right? And that's kind of how I deal with it. I take a breath, I make sure I exercise, and I tick things off the list and try to control the things I can. And, you know, take solace in the fact that the things I can't control. And there's nothing I can do about it.
How do you stay ahead of emerging topics? So I imagine in a national security practice, you're looking a lot at what's going on in various places around the world. I'm sure the law is changing on a regular basis. How do you stay on top of those topics while keeping up with the day-to-day workload?
Yeah. So fortunately, the day-to-day workload, I have a great team that works with me that covers a lot of, the day-to-day workload, the drafting, the researching, that kind of stuff. I'm on calls and in conversations and meetings most days all day. And that's kind of how I stay on top of things, looking at trends, talking to government agencies, talking to government officials, talking to partners and colleagues of mine in the same, in the same space or similar space, watching the news, paying attention to what's going on in the world, and spending a lot of time in the world. Actually, it's probably no surprise, spending a lot of time in the world, not just in, the United States or in Virginia or DC area, really exposes you to helps expose me to what's going on in the world. And so I use all of those kinds of things to certainly know what's happening in real time, but also to try to forecast what's going to happen in, weeks, months, years, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. Some administrations are easier to predict than other administrations. So yeah, but that's how I do it. I try to stay on top of things to the best I can. And occasionally, we'll if we think we're coming up on something or we're projecting something is going to happen, we'll publish an alert or write a paper on it just to give clients, whomever wants to read it, some insight into what we think we're seeing and what we think is going to happen.
Is there one thing you do as a leader that you would like to see more leaders doing?
Probably. There's a certain amount of arrogance that gets associated with that answer, right? Answering yes to that question, I think. Here's what I will say about me and leadership. I've failed as many times as I've succeeded as a leader. I've tried to use those failures to become a better human and a better leader. The one thing that the people who work with me, I think, would say without hesitation is that they always know where they stand with me. I'm very direct. I'm I'm a blunt person. I mean what I say and I say what I mean. And I think that's for me, there's no other way. Anything else would be disingenuous coming from me. And people would see through it almost immediately, if not immediately. So that works well for me. I would like that from when I'm dealing with other people. I would like them to do the same thing. Like I'd rather get punched in the face than massaged on the back while what you're really trying to do is punch me in the face. And so I try to do that, metaphorically, of course, but not everybody responds to that the same way. So some people like that, some people don't. But that's how I would like leaders that I work with to interact with me because that's what I respond to. So
Okay. How do you know when you've got a team working effectively, and how do you cultivate that culture?
right away, identify if there's anybody that does not mesh with the team, right? Is not gelling and figure out why. Is it personalities? Is it ego? Is it, whatever it is. And if that person is not a good fit for the greater team, they need to go right away. That's it. Because it just takes one bad apple, right? And by bad apple, I don't mean bad person, just one small piece that will create a ripple effect and destroy a team. And so to the extent that I'm able to, and it's not difficult when the rest of your teammates are telling you, hey, this person is not a good fit, right? So to the extent I'm able to identify those people We move on from them. And making sure that they operate efficiently is part of that, right? And so when you've got people who respect each other, who like each other, who work well together, there's a certain amount of efficiency that just goes along with that. And when building the team and when growing the team, what I've realized and what we've been doing, what I've been doing more of is empowering the people below me, associates, whether they're junior or senior, and other partners, whether, that are junior or, senior, to have a say in who we add to our team. So for example, if I'm hiring a new lawyer or a paralegal or a law clerk, I want to give my teammates, because they're the ones who are going to be dealing with them day in, day out, hours and hours at a time. I want to give them the opportunity to interview them, to meet with them, to sit down with them. And if they're not a good fit, if they come back, if I've got 3 people telling me one person is just not a good fit for our team, I don't need to talk to them because my people aren't going to want to work with them. So that's how I believe we're empowering our team to make those decisions. And I think all of that contributes to cohesion and efficiency. And sometimes you get it wrong. And when you get it wrong, you just kind of, the saying in the military is you cut sling load, right? You cut the cord. When you get it wrong, you cut the cord, you let it go.
How do you approach difficult decisions?
Difficultly. I don't know the difference these days between a difficult decision and an easy decision. The margin between the two is so small because, what might be difficult for me is probably easy for somebody else. And what's easy for me may be difficult for somebody else. I try to approach all decisions by really understanding what the second and third order effects of whatever the decision is going to be that I make, what effects will come from that, and whether those are good or bad, and whether I can live with them or not. And I do that across the board with any decision that I make, even the ones that seem to be impulsive. And I acknowledge I make some impulsive decisions here and there, but even the ones that appear to other people to be impulsive, I've tried to take a second to kind of think through second and third order effects. In my 20s, not really. It was just instant gratification all the time. In my early 30s, about the same. But then, in my 30s is when I started to mature. And now as I approach 50, it's like, I think I've got it down pretty well.
What advice do you give most often to new people in the field?
There's a couple of pieces of advice. Number one, first and foremost, I tell people, I get the question all the time, like, how did you make your transition from the military? Or how did you end up in the military? Or how did you find success in the private sector? And how are you successful at what you're doing now? It's always those questions. Those are always the questions that are being asked. And it's strange for me because I don't know what success looks like. I only know what happiness feels like. And so I've lived by a very simple philosophy throughout my entire life. Do what you do until you don't love it anymore, and then go do something else. And almost without exception, I've always done that from the time I was in my teens, which led to some pretty bad decisions because, like what satisfies you as an 18, 19, 20, 25-year-old is different than what will satisfy you as a 40-year-old, but the effects from when you're 25, you may still be feeling in your 40s, right? So I explain that to people. I say, listen, you have to love what you do. And if you don't, go do something else, whether it's woodworking or rock climbing or skiing or practicing law or basket weaving, whatever it is, love what you do, and everything else will kind of work itself out. So that's the advice I give to everybody. I think I give it to everybody that asks. What I try to instill in the people who work with me and in my kids and in the people around me is it doesn't matter what you do. You make your decision on what you want to do. I don't care one way or the other. Like, if you want to be a lawyer, awesome. That's great. If you don't want to be a lawyer, that's fine too. But if you're going to be a lawyer, be the absolute best lawyer you can be. If you're going to be a lacrosse player, be the absolute best lacrosse player you can be until you don't want to do that anymore, and then go pick something else. So I try to make sure that I give that advice when asked, and even sometimes when not asked, when unprompted, because I think if you do that, if you kind of live your life that way, everything else will just kind of fall into place. And I never ever give advice about things that I shouldn't be giving advice about. So if somebody asks me their advice on, like, for example, raising a child, I don't ever give advice on raising a child, right? I don't give advice on areas that are A, really sensitive, and B, I don't feel like, I'm particularly qualified to give advice. Even though I've raised two children and they're alive and healthy, you know. But far be it from me to give advice to a mother or father on how to raise their children. I'll just judge them quietly in the background.
How do you approach mentoring?
Yeah, I approach mentoring like I'm not mentoring. I talk to my people regularly, almost every day, some multiple times a day, if not every day, certainly throughout the week, and give them guidance, tell them what they're doing well, tell them what they're not, tell them where they can improve, tell them what they don't need to improve on, praise them when they deserve it, give them honest feedback, and help and explain their failures when they occur. And they occur all the time. Mistakes happen all the time. And so being honest with them all the time is, I think, A, I think they deserve it, and B, I demand it of myself. So that's how I approach mentoring, and getting people together and just having some fun so that people kind of understand who they're working with. It's when you can kind of let your hair down and just kind of relax and just be together to have fun together. I try to encourage that type of behavior. I try to host that type of behavior, and I think that goes a long way in certainly building a team and helping develop a team. And that's kind of how I approach mentorship. And, certainly there are formal processes as well. Like, every organization has, you are going to be assigned to this person as their mentor, and you have to do this, this, and this quarterly. Yeah, there's that, which I find to be generally useless, but we engage in the practice anyway.
Do you tend to recommend any particular resources, books, podcasts, blogs, etc.?
Yeah, for sure. It just depends on what we're talking about. Like if somebody wants to learn a ton about cybersecurity, there's, a couple of books that I recommend. If somebody wants to learn about national security and wants to listen to a podcast, there's a couple of podcasts that I recommend, or that I say that I'll listen to from time to time that are really good. Most of which I get from my wife, because my wife does, she does kind of the first level review on everything, because she loves to receive information. And so, I'll say, okay, I'll listen to that. And oh, yeah, that's good. So I'll recommend that. But I don't do it, like, I don't generally do it unsolicited. So if somebody asks me a question about, hey, what are you listening to, or what are you reading, or, or which these days, what I'm reading is nothing. But, normally when, what are you reading?
I bet you're reading a lot of briefs and memos.
I read a lot of articles online for sure, but, and pleadings and things like that. But yeah, if asked, I'll certainly do that. What I will do with people is I'll try to get them to work within certain tool sets, right? Like things that they'll need to understand, when doing the kind of work we do. So much of the work that I do relies on what the corporate world calls corporate intelligence, what I call just intelligence, right? Like, open source intelligence, signal intelligence to the extent we have access to it, things like that, background. So I try to expose the people I work with to tools and kind of means and methods to be able to obtain the right kind of information.
On your way up the ladder to where you are today, what was the hardest transition you had to deal with?
So the hardest transition I had was my transition from our officer basic course, judge advocate officer basic course, to Iraq. So I was a direct commissionee. And what that means is I went to college, then at some point went to law school, was a licensed attorney, and then joined the military as an officer and lawyer in the JAG Corps. So I joined the Army as a JAG in what's known as a direct commission program. So I had no prior military experience with the U.S. military. And so when I joined, I had never been a part of the U.S. military and never deployed with the U.S. military, never been in a U.S. military formation, just didn't know what any of it was. So the first, 4 months of the military was learning that stuff, right? Like learning kind of how to salute and learning how to march and learning how to do this and learning how to do that. And then, part of that was learning military law and international law, particularly international humanitarian law, which is the civilian term for law of armed conflict. What I wasn't prepared for, which I don't know that I could have been, frankly, was leaving my basic course and getting assigned right away to a brigade combat team that's deployed in Iraq. So I was in Virginia one day in training. I was in Texas the next day to in process my unit, and I was in Iraq the day after. And getting off of that Blackhawk, which was my first ride on Blackhawk, getting off of that Blackhawk for the first time in at 2:00 in the morning on a forward operating base in one of the, if not the most dangerous areas in Iraq in 2005 and 6 was a little daunting. And then that first kind of 2-3 weeks where it was just a fire hose of information and trying to figure out where I was, where I ranked, both, according to rank and in like real life, where I kind of measure up against all of these people that are around me, these senior enlisted soldiers, these, E6s, 7s, and 8s who had been in the military for 15, 20, 25 years, who are supposed to be saluting me and looking to me for information. And I've been here for 5 minutes. That was definitely the hardest transition I've ever had to make. And everything after that, frankly, been pretty easy.
I can imagine.
Nobody's shooting at me. I'm not these days, like nobody's shooting at me. Hopefully that stays that way. I'm not giving advice on killing people. Nobody's dying as a result of my advice. So it's, easy days otherwise, right? Like it's everything else is just, it allows me to kind of maintain focus and keep calm because I'm not doing that kind of stuff anymore. Nothing is life or death.
It's a pretty powerful perspective.
It's a perspective, right? It's my perspective, but we're a victim of circumstance, right? And our own experiences. So my experience creates an aperture that allows me to function. Other people's experiences create an aperture which I will never understand, but it allows them to function. I think mine is better, but not everybody does.
Sure. Are you watching any trends develop in the space that are going to require that we change how we lead our teams?
I've never actually thought about that question before. I'm not really sure that I've considered the changes in trends that I have seen and that are happening. I don't think I've ever considered an effect being how we lead teams and develop teams. There are certainly changes happening in the national security space every day. Geopolitical conflict and geopolitical norms are changing. Countries that the U.S. didn't care about 10 years ago, it cares very much about now, and it has second, third, fourth order effects on how we operate day to day and how the US government operates day to day, and then, the impact on clients. So I can speak about those trends all day. But you kind of have to adjust to your audience, right? Right. Know your audience and adapt to your audience. I think that for a long time, and I imagine every generation says this about the generations that came after them, right? So I'm Generation X. So, you know, next was the Ys, and then the Gen Zs, and then the millennials, and I don't know what we're on now.
Alpha, I think.
Alpha. Okay. So, it's it was the biggest complaint was, okay, how do I interact with these millennials? How do I interact with these Gen Zers? What do I, do I have to give a participation trophy, right? That's the big thing. And I'm definitely going to get in trouble for saying all this, by the way. But so those were the types of trends that impacted, or theoretically impacted, leadership style. It didn't impact mine, and sometimes it got me in trouble. But I think we're at a place now, at least in my immediate orbit, where everybody is on the same page. We're all kind of focused on the same mission, and we're cohesive, and we got a strategy, and we execute on that strategy. I'm sure there will be things that come up where that throw that into kind of disarray, or where we have to adjust and adapt. That's just natural. But I don't know of any trends right now that would have an impact on my leadership style or the way that my team interacts. I could say AI and just make it simple, but I don't know that is true, because human interaction is still, it's something that I require. So regardless of what other people do, like, we're going to have a conversation. We're not going to allow the computer to act for us.
I like that. So when you're hiring, what qualities are critical to you and how do you screen for them?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's hard. It's really, really hard, because everybody puts on their best face, right? When they're hiring. Look, the people that I want working for me are incredibly smart, high functioning, loyal people with impeccable integrity. Everything else I can deal with. Everything else I can train, right? Those are the people I want working with me. How you screen for that is really sometimes a crapshoot, particularly with young lawyers who are coming right out of law school, or who have had one job, at a law firm. Because I can't call, unless I know the person, I can't call the firm and say, hey, how was this person is moving on? Because most times it's confidential, right? That somebody's leaving. And so you kind of have to make those decisions. So like I said before, what I really try to do is get people who are prospective members of my team, our team, right? Get them with the people on the team who are going to be working with them most regularly, and get their assessment. And I trust their judgment for the most part. Not in everything, but on most things. And so I try to get them to do the screening and spending time with these people, making sure that they have integrity, that they're trustworthy, that they're smart, that they're good at issue spotting and solving problems, regardless of how complex a problem is, that they're at least on the right track, and that they think critically, and that they get along with everybody. But it's hard. It's not easy. And I get it wrong as much as I get it right. And it's true. But I also have a high, I don't know, I shouldn't say high, I don't have a high attrition rate. What I do have is, when I get it wrong, I move on from that person. I just explain, like, look, this isn't going to work. It's not working for me. It's probably not working for you. You'd be better off doing something else. I'm happy to give you a recommendation, help find you something, but this team is not right for you, because I just don't have the bandwidth to deal with somebody who's not going to meet expectations.
Yep, that happens. Unfortunately, that's all the time we've got for today. Before we wrap it up, if people want to follow along with your work, is there somewhere they can go?
Yeah, I mean, I post on LinkedIn occasionally, probably not as often as I should, but certainly LinkedIn. My profile is open, and you can always send me a request to connect. Also on Eversheds Sutherland's website, where we publish a lot of our work. related to national security trends and national security, things like that. And if you're interested in any of the symposiums we conduct, or, understanding whatever it is you may want to understand, please don't hesitate to reach out. My email is complicated, but if you go to the Eversheds Sutherland website and look up Patrick Gilman, you'll find me. But it's Patrick Gilman at eversheds-sutherland.us or .com, either one.
Awesome. Thanks for the fantastic conversation, Patrick, and I'm sure I'll see you soon.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it, Ben. Take care.